Okay, Bob. So, before the interview process, how should the room be set up?
That's a good question, Rachel. It basically should be set up so that the person doing the interview, you, no, you are in a comfortable chair and you're sitting close to the lens, so that I don't have to look over there to talk to you, and then back. You don't just get a profile. I can talk to you, and you can still see most of my face. So that would be a big plus, to sit close to the camera. The other thing is the background. In this case, it's a lovely background. It's got some texture to it, and the bricks are nice, and the bookshelf is nice, and the lighting. What you have is available lighting coming through this window. There's a window over there. It's perfect. Available lighting is much softer. So setting it up with available lighting, setting it up with a table so somebody can use or have a coffee or put their notes down, all of those things make the interview, the person being interviewed, more comfortable. And as we mentioned before, make sure that when they're sitting down, that their knees aren't up in the air, and that their knees are way above their bum. Make sure that they're sitting in they've got an upright position, and that they're in a good, stable chair. Soft, comfortable chairs might look good, but they don't feel good for the person being interviewed. So basically, that's as simple a setup as you can get. It's very, very simple. Make sure that you've got the camera mounted on a tripod, so you're not jiggling all over the place. And any changes you have to make to the camera, make sure there's an operator there, so that you don't have to wait and pause and climb over there and make the zoom and come back again. So you're all set up in this situation. Now you've got a camera operator and you've got the setup done fine. Other than that, it's a very simple, very easy setup. And make sure that the person being interviewed is comfortable in an easy, comfortable chair and is at ease. Sometimes choosing the location, the best location might be their living room, or their front yard, or their porch, or if they're comfortable and if it's decent weather. Whatever is best for the person being interviewed. That mix of looks. I mean, right now you've got a nice combination of lighting and background. So that's a perfect situation. And this is a very quiet room, and there's no distractions for you or for me. So all of those setup things you've pretty well got done.
Perfect. Should the interviewee have the questions before or during the interview, or a mixture of both?
I think the way I always do it, Rachel, is I sit down with the person being interviewed. We'll call them the interviewee. I sit down with the interviewee beforehand or on the phone, and I say, this is what we'd like to go over, either your life story, or we're going to ask you some questions about this or that. And I'd like to get, as the person producing it, should get the interviewee's feedback. What, as the interviewee, would I like to talk about? What are the highlights that I would like to talk about? So not only do I, as the interviewee, know what you're going to ask me, but I can set the schedule. This is more important than that. You've got a question here, perhaps, that I don't know anything about or I'm comfortable about. So all of the questions, when we finalize everything, I'll be totally comfortable with and be able to think about and give you some feedback on. And maybe because I know what I'm doing, I might say, you might want to ask this or that. So you'll get a better interview. You'll get a more in-depth interview, and the more relaxed I am as the interviewee, the better the interview is going to be.
Perfect. That actually leads us into the next question. How can the interviewer keep it relaxed?
Well, yeah, that's the less distractions, the best. This room is perfect for that. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on, people walking back and forth, and stuff going on, electronic things happen. So try to minimize. You won't be able to eliminate them altogether because life goes on, but try to minimize the distractions. So they're trying to do the best they can, as an interviewee. So no distractions as much as you can possibly make it. Give them water or coffee to drink. That's really important, that people have a chance to wet their whistle, that they don't get a dry mouth when they're talking, because that relaxes you and keeps you calm, whatever they want to drink, whether it's pop or coffee or whatever it is. So those are things that are the best. Be prepared. If you as an interviewer are prepared with your notes and electronically prepared, your equipment, you're not fuddling over the gear, so I'm waiting for you to get it together. That's unsettling. So if you come prepared with your questions and your technical gear, and you're sitting in a good place that's nicely lit, you're fine. If say this is in a place or in the wintertime or whatever, and you can't, you don't have available lighting, which hardly ever happens. Almost always, you can get available lighting. You can get lights electronically that turn on and shine on the camera. That shine on the suspect. The suspect. It's like that you can shine on the interviewee. That heightens their discomfort. So if you can stay away from artificial lighting, it's way, way better than just available lighting. So the heat and the technology and all those things combine into a stressful environment. And so stay away from them as much as you can.
Perfect. So during the interview process, what techniques should the interviewer use to be able to explore the questions more in depth?
Oh, a really good technique is silence. What you're just doing there, just nod. Just if I answer the question, just be silent and nod, and then that'll encourage me to elaborate on my answer. If I don't, you say, is there any more you'd like to say about that? Or what, you just gently encourage the interviewee to talk more about the subject. That usually makes for a more in-depth interview. There's those little bits of lovely information that you get when you're as an interviewer. You just be quiet, and I'm thinking, one thing I've always wondered, and then you say something, and it really heightens the quality of the whole interview. So what you're doing, just be quiet and nod, is great.
Perfect. What is the importance of the narrative approach to interviewing?
The narrative approach, you'd have to tell me what you mean by the narrative approach.
That's a great question. So, what is the difference between narrative interviewing and, say, just a typical interview of any other sort? What is the special use and purpose of a narrative interview than, say, just interviewing someone about the weather or the news?
Gotcha. Yep. Nicely done. I think my understanding of a narrative answer is it becomes a bit of a story. and I'm telling you this is how it started, this is the end, this is at the middle of the story. So you tell a little bit of a story. It's a little bit of a narrative story. Was your question, what's the purpose of that?
What is the importance?
Oh, I think it's very important. It's much easier for me as an interviewee to get the information out. It's easier to follow things. For example, I was asked last summer to tell my life story in just a little bit. So I just narratively said, this is what started, this is how it was, this is what happened, all the way through with little snippets, and it was wonderful because it's so much easier than, okay, tell your life story, and you think, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I have to organize it. Well, you just have to tell the story of it. That's so simple.
Perfect. And what to do if someone becomes emotional during the interview? How should this situation be handled?
Do you mean if the interviewee becomes emotional? That's what you want. You want it to happen, and you just let the camera roll, and you be gentle, and you don't stop it. You keep the camera going, you let the camera roll, and it's wonderful when that happens. It's almost magic when somebody gets really tearful. I'm really a bad example because I have a weak tear duct. So I cry at the drop of a hat. Not cry, I don't sob, but my eyes water at the drop of a hat. But whether a person sobs or whether they're just have a weak tear duct in there, have a few tears and they're just emotional, the camera, if the camera can capture that, it's absolutely priceless. Don't stop it. If I, as an interviewee, feel uncomfortable, I'll stop it. And I'll just leave. I'll walk away or something. I've seen that happen, and so have you, I'm sure. I just can't take this. I have to leave. And they will tell you that. Most people will say, I don't want to go down that road. They'll tell you most of the time. They'll try to hold it together, but they'll get emotional, and they'll give you the answer you want. So never be afraid of them being emotional.
That's a great point. So what are the best approaches to narrative interviewing in general? Is there any place that you should really start specifically, or should you really just let whoever is in the seat kind of just guide it and meet them where they're at?
That's a good question. I don't think there's any advice I could give you on that other than I've never experienced an interview. As an interviewer, when I'm interviewing people, you always start at the beginning. People say, geez, I don't know where to start. You always start at the beginning. How did you meet this person? How did you come, how did you come to be involved with this project? Or you try to bring it back to the start, and then they go from there. From there, I met this person, and then I learned this, and then we got involved, and we got romantically involved, and we got married. Whatever happens, you start at the beginning. You say, okay, how, that's why I'm probably boring sometimes when I meet somebody at a party. I'll say, how did you meet so-and-so? Or how did you ever get involved? Or how do you know so-and-so? And people want to know that. People want to know how you got involved, and people want to know the story. So it's a fairly simple thing to jump into, I think, and that narrative approach is what people are used to. I mean, when you look at any great teacher from either the Muslim tradition or the Christian tradition, they tell stories. Christ told parables. It was always stories. That's how you teach things. That's how you tell people things so that it'll stay up here and it'll stay in their heart. It's a very important thing to do, is tell things in stories, is a narrative approach to it. And I find that term a bit scary, but stories are easier. To start them up, it's fairly easy to do. To stop and have them shut up is sometimes harder, and I'm going to have to shut up.
So, what would you never do during a narrative interviewing session?
Oh, one of the things you never do is lose eye contact. Eye contact is so important. You read your notes or look away or act disinterested in what the person's saying. That's the biggest no-no. I did that. I was when I first started my company, it was about 25 years ago. I was invited to on live television on CHSJ. They had live news television in the studio with big cameras. So I went to St. John, and he said, "So Bob, you started your company. Do you want to tell us a bit about it?" And just as I started to talk, he moved over and got his notes and didn't pay any attention to me at all, because the camera was on me, not on him. And he didn't even look at me. It was like he wasn't listening or didn't care. And I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I mean, I did it, and I didn't, because I didn't have anywhere to look there. So I looked at the camera, and it looked kind of strange, between, but when you've got someone talking to someone else, if in the middle they all of a sudden look at the camera and talk, they're lost. They don't know where to go, So that would be the biggest no-no when you're interviewing someone, is lose eye contact and act like you're not interested in what they're saying.
So what are some tips and tricks to not lose eye contact?
I don't think there's any... I was told this by, who was it? Some really, one of my mentors, spiritual mentors. And what he does, he looks right there between people's eyes. If he can't stare at their eyes for some reason, he just looks right there. And it looks like, if I look right there, it looks like I'm looking you in your eyes. I mean, I'm not. But that's a good trick. If that, as the interviewer, if that bothers you, you can try that. Other than that, there's not much you can do. You have to maintain eye contact. I'm sorry, but that's, I don't think there's an easy way out of that. If you're not interested in someone enough to maintain eye contact, then what they're saying, you should stop recording. Yeah, I don't think there's any tips other than looking between the eyes. I don't think there is.
So we kind of talked about what the room should look like, and you had mentioned natural lighting is the best. Your experience is quite in depth, and we have received a lot of information that is really helpful. What other information do you think is really applicable to any situation going forward? Because we've talked about how to make the person comfortable and how to set up the room and the lighting. So what have we kind of missed, or what do you think is important to add?
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't think of anything that's really important, and part of the reason I can't think of it is that I didn't prepare enough for the interview, and I think you and I could have talked about what we were going to talk about a little bit more. Maybe I would have done a little bit more thinking on that. But I can't think of any other thing that we haven't gone over. I think we pretty well, in my point of view, covered a lot of bases. The big thing when you're interviewing is pre-interviewing people, talking to them on the phone or in person, and doing the interview, going over it, what you're going to go over, what the key points are, what the highlights are in their mind, and and organize it, and then get back to them, and you'll say, Rachel, remember that conversation we had? This is what I got out of it. Are you happy with that? Is there anything more we should add before we talk? I would, if you were the interviewee, we didn't have that conversation in depth. We didn't have it yet. So that would be a big thing for me to go over. And I always do that. If I'm going to interview someone, I always have a pre-interview. I call it a pre-interview, just because it's an easy thing to say, and people get it. But that's what it is. It's going over all the key points, and then discovering maybe there's other points other than setting the room up. Maybe in the furniture and the clothing. And for instance, you try to avoid bright clothes like plaids and hound checks, because they fluctuate in the video, and you try to avoid whites. So all of that to say there are rules you can follow in terms of what to wear other than what's comfortable. My most comfortable shirt is a big loud plaid shirt. I call it my Grampy shirt, because my kids are around. It's red and black and all kinds of colors. Well, it would look horrendous on television. So you have to really think about what you're wearing. I mean, I'm really comfortable in black. I have, I think, 5 black sweaters. So I'm really comfortable in black sweaters. But because I have a white beard, I have to make sure that, that I don't have white hairs on me. And when you're doing the interview, before you do it, you have to make sure that the person you're interviewing is okay, that they don't have a cowlick or a piece of hair standing up, or that they don't have something on a piece of dirt on their sweater or whatever. You have to do all of that stuff. So there's a lot of just ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill stuff that you have to take care of to make sure everything's set up in the interview. But it's by far and away the biggest thing is that they are comfortable and they are informed and they feel that they're in control of the process, and because when you feel you're out of control and you don't know what's happening, it's the worst, and you don't get a good interview. But if the person is comfortable and in control, you're fine, and you get moments in the interview where they can be emotional, because they don't have to worry about all the other external stuff like the technology or the things in the room. They just have to worry about what's in their heart and what you're telling them. So it turns out to be a much better interview.
Just to kind of go back, you had said if the interviewee doesn't feel comfortable, and it can kind of seem like they're out of control of the situation. Is there any grounding questions that can kind of bring it back or make them feel a little bit more grounded or comfortable?
Yeah, to make them feel grounded or comfortable usually starts way before the interview. That's what I was referring to, that they know what's going to happen, they know what the questions are, they know you've told them that it's real simple, don't worry about it. You've told them basically not exactly what to wear, but wear something comfortable. You've made sure that they understand that this is not a threatening situation they're going in, that your job is to make them look and sound as good as can possibly be done. You know, they need to know that. And they don't, so that sort of control situation, laying the ground, isn't done during the interview. It's done before the interview. And then during the interview, you just keep it up. And you're doing a really good job, I might say. You know, you're doing great. You're doing great. So I don't have any other, I mean, you were asking me for advice that you're already practicing. You know, you're already doing a lot of the things that I would say you should do.